Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles and Bru Mccoy.
Hey everyone, how you doing out there today? We're so glad you came back to the CFBDynasty.com podcast. My name is Matt Knowles. I'm here alongside the founder and creator of CFB Dynasty, Mr. Bru Mckelver. Brian, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm great, man. Just here in the Ocala office for Searchalytics and taking a break to do the pod. Super stoked to be on talking football. We're so close.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking all things wide receivers. We're not going to be worried about the tops of the list. We're going to be talking about sleepers, pitfalls, question marks, bounce backs, things like that are not going to be what you're going to get on the typical rankings list. And real quick, we are 17 days away from the start of the college football season. I know we're all excited, but I know that probably no one is excited as Bru Mckelver. Brian, 17 days from now, what are you going to be doing on college football opening Saturday? Give us a day in the life of BMAC on that opening Saturday.
So opening Saturday, we've got a pretty good slate. I'll obviously be watching football. We're going to have a lot of guys from the home league over, probably do some sort of a smoke out. And before you say, not what you're thinking immediately probably, but smoking out some ribs, some brisket, something like that to kind of get that full feel of fall. Except for the weather, because we're here in Florida and it's still flaming hot outside during the day. But otherwise, oh man, fully free and reserved for college football that Saturday. Can't wait.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait as well. We're going to talk about news and notes, any little things that pop up when we do these podcasts. Like you said, it's 17 days from the start of the college football season. Had a huge piece of breaking news happen this morning. Sam Hartman, the quarterback at Wake Forest, is out indefinitely with an undisclosed non-football related medical condition. That is massive in the ACC and massive in fantasy football. Sam Hartman is a valued quarterback and somebody that can raise the value of the players around him. Brian, what do you think about this huge news that dropped just this morning?
Oh man, it affects everyone at Wake, and with the indefinite kind of tag for him, you kind of got to shy away from Wake Forest in general in the draft. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing as we adjust our rankings with another big update coming on Friday. But yeah, that's rough news.
Yeah, that's unfortunate as well. I mean, obviously as an NC State fan, Wake Forest is one of their heated rivals, but you hate seeing a quality player like that go down with something that sounds a lot more serious than a hangnail or a sprained ankle. I mean, this sounds like something that's a life thing. So you really just hate to see stuff like that go down.
Yeah, and we keep dropping all of this news in the Discord, and that's really where we want to build a community just of college football fans, people that just want to come in, talk, and chat about college football, but we want to break all the news and everything there too. So every practice update you'll see in the conference talk section. So other things like, Grant Wells taking first team reps at Virginia Tech at quarterback is listed in the ACC channel. And then we've got, all kinds of other news. And as it happens, we'll keep updating that daily. So you'll see it all there. And that's going to directly affect our rankings. And
do you have the Discord up where you can bring it up in the other window?
Absolutely. That's a good idea. For those of you on YouTube, I'm going to pop it up here now so you can see some of this under the conference talk there. You'll see news happening, TJ Finley having some sort of moped trying to elude the cops. Maybe that does nothing for his battle with Zach Calzada at Auburn. But anyways, all of this news is there. Dominic Johnson, unsure if he'll be ready for the season opener for Arkansas. Rocket Sanders seemingly claiming that RB1 spot, definitely going into the season, and should be able to keep that up. But all that news is in there. Would love to come in and chat with you guys. We're now less than a year away from the video game. We've got a specific kind of chat line for that one. But yeah, anything you guys want to talk about that's college football focused, hey, we're in there. Love to chat.
And one of the great things about the Discord, we'll get to it at the very end of this podcast. If you want to ask a question, if you have any kind of comments for us, put it there in the Discord. And the best ones we're going to make sure we get to at the end of the show. And that's exactly what we're going to do today is we're going to get to some of your questions and comments when this thing wraps up here, when this thing is done. All right, so BMAC, let's get right down to it. Let's start talking wide receivers. I know you and the team that works behind the scenes at CFB Dynasty for the rankings have toiled and come up with some great rankings for wide receivers. But you see some guys out there that you think are getting drafted. Their ADPs are far below what you think their value really is. So let's get right down to it. Who are some of the guys that you want to talk about that are getting drafted too low as far as you're concerned, and why? Who's the first guy?
Yeah, sure. So the first guy on the list, and his average ADP is 118th, but he is easily going to crush that ADP, is Tyrone Tracy from Purdue. So you've got this Purdue pass-happy offense, Aiden O'Connell back, healthy at quarterback, no competition there with Jake Plummer moving on to Cal. David Bell, he's in the NFL in Cleveland now. Milton Wright, who was pretty much clearly going to be that number 2 guy who was going to step in as wide receiver 1 this year, is academically ineligible. The third guy, Jackson Anthrop, is gone. Anyways, Tyrone Tracy comes in, and not only is he going to be catching passes, he's in the spring game, and in the fall already, in fall practices, he's taking snaps at running back too. So you just figure he's going to be maybe not, a completely Percy Harvin type role, but you can expect him to crush that ADP.
All right, that's great. That's great. Who's the next guy on your list?
I'm going in order of ADP of guys that I think are going to outperform. So we've got Jojo Earl. He's currently being drafted most recently in the 187 ADP range. Jojo Earl is someone who is supremely talented. He's incredibly quick, and he's just a baller. Like, he's going to get the ball. He's got great hands, great in the slot, across the middle. And in that Alabama offense, some of these young receivers are going to really outperform their ADP, and Jojo Earl's that guy for me at Alabama.
Well, if you look at the last couple of years at Alabama as well, they are putting out some incredible wide receivers. The number of guys they've had drafted in the top of the draft in the NFL in the last couple of years is just unbelievable. The thing about Alabama wide receivers is if you get those guys that are going to be the bell cows there, the ones that are going to be getting all the targets, all the receptions, you're going to have a diamond in the rough, one of your personal 5-star guys. If you get one of those guys that is 3rd or 4th or 5th, they may not do a whole lot for you this year. I know a couple years ago when it was Devontae Smith, there was only 2 guys that were getting basically passes. It was Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. There wasn't a whole lot of other guys that were getting even targets. But every year Alabama reloads. So is Jojo Earl going to be the guy this year, one of those top 3 slots, or is he going to be a guy in the future? Alabama's normally an offense that you want to take a chance on because they find a way to really get some stats out of their wide receivers for sure.
And they will, with Bryce Young back at quarterback. They've got Tyler Harrell that came over from Louisville. He is practicing. He's not 100%. So you can just expect, other than Jermaine Burton, who's a top 10 fantasy option at receiver for Alabama this year, Jojo Earl is someone I love to kind of outperform there. Next on the list in the 150 ADP range is Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. This one, there's some trepidation a little bit because they've got a few other guys that we really don't have a clear wide receiver 1 for Ole Miss. But Mingo's been there. He's been in the system. They've had some other guys transfer in. I think Mingo is going to end up being that guy. He's a big body, outside receiver, definitely a prime red zone target. You'll expect good quarterback play no matter which way they go at quarterback. But yeah, Mingo is someone who's kind of oddly fallen since mock drafts early in the summer, late in the spring. As people are kind of falling in love with others. I still like Mingo a lot there at Ole Miss. I'm not as hyped about him as I am Jojo Earl or Tyrone Tracy, but Mingo is someone that you can look for late in drafts, and he'll outperform his ADP.
And I think it's interesting is I've got Brian's list on the backside. I can see the guys that he's got targeted to talk about in this show, and it's odd to see all these guys from like upper echelon Power 5 schools that are not getting the love. Just like the next guy on your list, I'll let you go to him. But the next guy on the list, another upper echelon Power 5 school with a wide receiver, just not getting a whole lot of love right now.
Jayden Hazelwood, so he was the number one receiver, I believe, when he came out, at least for one of the recruiting databases. But he's transferred into Arkansas, and really, Arkansas, the way they've targeted him, they want him to be what Treylon Burks was last year. They don't go super deep in terms of fantasy relevant wide receivers. But Burks last year, 66 catches, 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns. Hazelwood has a similar body type, a little bit more athletic, but a deep threat for sure. Tall receiver, great red zone target. I'll expect him to lead the way for Arkansas. And just kind of not a very exciting player. He's someone that a lot of people took in Devy drafts and stuff, and they've cooled on him over the years just based on performance. But at Arkansas this year, he's going to be the featured guy, and we'll see how that shakes out. It should be great for them. He's currently ADP around 176 recently.
And then we have one more from the upper echelon Power 5s right now in this group. So let's go to Ameca Aggiebuff from Ohio State.
Yeah, I like him as a supremely talented receiver. If you look at like USC, they've got a bunch of wide receivers that are getting drafted kind of high, which is going to lead to some disappointment there. Not to bury the lead on something we'll talk about later in the podcast, but Ohio State, probably the best passing attack in the country. And so outside of your top couple that everyone's drafting really high with, Marvin Harrison and Smith and Jigba, they're going to have a third guy that's worthy. And certainly in best ball leagues, you're going to have Egbuka kind of blow up some weeks, and you'll just expect that. So I like him a lot there, and he's someone, especially if you're in some sort of dynasty or keeper league, he's someone to draft or trade for now. With Smith, Jackson Smith and Jigba, goes pro, and then you have Harrison and Egbuka there.
All right, so we finally are going to get to a group of five school that I am definitely a homer on, not because they're my favorite school, but because I just really love Grayson McCall as a quarterback. But if you watched this podcast or listened to it last week, we talked about Coastal Carolina's running game having some sleepers. Now we're going to go to Bru Mckelver's next sleeper, which is a wide receiver at Coastal Carolina. Why is this guy on your list there, Brian?
6'4", 210-pound transfer in. He could end up just being the main target. Obviously, also in the red zone, touchdowns are huge for fantasy. He's going to get a lot of targets.
We're talking Sam Pinkney, by the way. My bad.
Sam Pinkney, yes. Sorry, good call there, Matt. And I think it's hilarious that in the home league, Uncle Joe just cut him. So I was like, what is he doing? Add him to my draft board there.
Joe's got to keep things interesting for us. I mean, if you guys don't know Uncle Joe, man, Uncle Joe, he's actually Brian's uncle, but he's Uncle Joe to everybody. But Joe's won championships across many different leagues. And there's times that Joe will ask us a question like, what are the rules of the league? And you're like, Joe, you've been playing for 15 years, man. You should know these rules by now. So Joe, we just made you famous. You're now a topic of discussion on the podcast. And we need you to do something crazy at our draft coming up this weekend. We have our fill-in draft for the home league, as Brian calls it, where we're drafting to replace all of our guys that left the college league to go to the pros. Or who went to a non-fantasy position or went to an FCS school. So we have our college draft, and Joe's going to be there. He's going to be keeping us entertained with his silliness and insanity, and keeping us all on our toes.
Yeah, you've got it. He's just one of the characters of our personal league, and it's awesome. But Yeah, if you find him on Discord, he's Pac Joe. Anyways, give him a hard time if you connect with him. But yeah. So Sam Pinkney, love him there. He's currently ADP 147, which is up a little bit from the 154 that we had previously in spring. But yeah, check him out. Great sleeper pick who could end up being one of the better receivers. And then we're going to get kind of deep here. I'm going to go ahead and mention Julian Fleming as someone who, could potentially have one of the starter roles, but maybe not. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out in fall camp. But Fleming, Egbuka, both of those guys at Ohio State are there to watch. I've got two final ones. Beau Collins is an elite talent at Clemson. But the problem is he's at Clemson where there's kind of quarterback's been disappointing, but they've got a 5-star backup this year. So I think we'll see early on with the Georgia Tech and a really desperate Georgia Tech team. Week 1, we'll see if DJU is going to kind of turn it around and win the job because they've got some easier games right after that. But if Clemson does figure it out, Beau Collins figures to be the feature wide receiver and someone who's going to far exceed his 203 ADP. I mean, in touchdowns alone, he'll crush that if they figure it out and through the air there at Clemson.
I think you have one more on the list.
Lastly, yes, kind of an annoying recruitment to follow if you did. Bru Mccoy, who was he going to go to Texas or USC? He doesn't know, and then he transfers over to Tennessee in one of the fastest paced offenses in the country. I think they were the fastest paced, at least in the SEC. And they're hurting on defense at Tennessee. They're going to be in more shootouts, specifically hurting at DB. So Bru Mccoy, if he can come in with his talent, with his size, he can come in and kind of be wide receiver 2 there to Cedric Tillman. They're going to have a great 1-2 punch potentially there, and that's one that he'll either boom or bust really quickly, but someone worth taking a shot at late in your draft.
All right, good stuff. So that's the sleepers that we have for right now. We do have a couple other categories that we want to get down to. So let's talk about some questions. Stuff we talked about a little bit earlier, things like A.T. Perry at Wake Forest. If you have him on your draft board, you want to put a big question mark beside him. That doesn't mean take him off the board because he's an elite receiver. But now that you've had the news come out about his quarterback, that's going to be massive. Is A.T. Perry at Wake Forest going to be able to produce what you need? And the other thing to think about as well is it also matters what kind of league you're in. If you're in a yearly redraft league, you may want to shy away from him because of the situation that just happened. If you're in a college dynasty or college to pro dynasty, sometimes you're not drafting for what the guy is going to do this year. You're drafting for what he's going to do next year or for the potential of him to graduate up to the next level. So you always have to keep all of those different things in mind. So the longer your league is, the less you'd probably want to shy away from a player that's got an injury concern on their team. But I think this morning that really put a big question mark beside A.T. Perry if you have him on your board. Is there anybody else, Brian, that you know of off the top of your head, or any situations? It could be a situation at a school where you look at and say, what's the big question mark going to be there?
Off the top of my head, not really. I have some that I'm going to get into when we go into the questions from Discord. So I'll save mine for that. But yeah, nothing else for me yet.
All right, I'm gonna throw. We have a category for bounce backs. I'll just give my bounce back right here. I'd like to see what happens with Marvin Mims at Oklahoma this year. Marvin Mims came in as a freshman. When he came in, he was the number 5 wide receiver on the Oklahoma offense preseason, and he ended up becoming their most valuable receiver and they're one of their most consistent players in his freshman year. Last year, that was not the case. Last year, Oklahoma's offense had a lot of issues, and he just got lost in the shuffle. There was talk of him potentially transferring in the offseason, but he stayed. I really want to see what Marvin Mims is going to do, because if we can get that Marvin Mims from his freshman year, then Marvin Mims could be a potential first-round draft pick in the upcoming NFL draft. But if we get the Marvin Mims from last year, we're probably going to see him at a different school next year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see Dylan Gabriel from USC transferring in, who he kind of gels with. You kind of got to figure it's going to be Mims. Hazelwood's gone, as we mentioned earlier. I like that call out a lot. I think Mims has good potential to exceed where he's being drafted and kind of get back to form of what we expect from him. You could see some crazy highlights. But Dylan Gabriel's more of a pocket passer than what they've had there. So I think that's going to be really interesting. All things pointing in Mims' favor.
All right. So as you said earlier, so as not to bury the lead, we have a couple other notes for some other questions. But we are going to, instead of asking the question to one another, we're going to go to the Discord because there's a couple of good comments, a couple of good questions coming off the Discord. And we want to make sure that we are showing you guys, if you go and participate in the CFB Dynasty Discord channel, that you have a chance to actually get yourself onto this podcast.
Let's do it. So we had Big Red hit us up with one of the questions. What are the common pitfall scenarios that you see? So when someone asks something like that, I want to first define it. So in my opinion, a common pitfall scenario would be like a player or a position that looks really appealing, but the situation will naturally kind of lead you to fantasy disparity, and we don't want you all to be depressed. So let's take a look at a few of these situations to potentially avoid. Based on average draft position alone, you can pretty much guarantee that USC wide receivers, there's going to be some disappointed people. You had Mario Williams transfer with Caleb Williams from Oklahoma to USC, and Mario Williams was looking great at that point. You were a little like Gary Bryant Jr. really took off last year when their top receiver went down, and kind of he was going to be the guy, and then Mario came in, and now Mario's going to be the guy. And then Jordan Addison transferred in from Pitt, who was the Biletnikoff winner. So you've got those three guys pairing with like who was a former great player at Memphis, Taj Washington, and other great receivers that have transferred in. You've just got to be careful with USC. You've got to wait and get good value if you're going to go with a Mario Williams or a Gary Bryant Jr. You know, we've got Jordan Addison pretty high on our rankings list, but dang, there's certainly other good, talented players there. And they've already talked about playing 8 and having, you know, some crazy packages there for receivers. That's just not a situation that's appealing to me.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. I know you said you have a couple others. What's the next one on your potential pitfall list? So LSU. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all good. LSU quarterback. So, you know, they've got a 3-way battle. And, you know, I was just recently listening to Josh Pate on Late Kick, kind of going over his news and notes from intel around the country. And he pretty much thinks Nussmeier's going to start at some point in the season. And then you've got the 3-way battle there. So you look at, you know, the quarterback that's going to be throwing to Kayshon Boutte, one of the most talented, best receivers in the country, and that can be appealing. But that quarterback situation is far less than appealing for fantasy purposes. You know, even if you're in best ball, it's like one of those you just pretty much want to avoid unless you get a steal, or if you draft like super late right before the season and you've got good intel, then maybe you can make that jump.
I'll tell you one of my pitfalls, and this is just an in general draft note. One of my pitfalls, I know Brian is going to get a chuckle out of this, is don't fall too much in love with group of 5 guys. Doesn't mean don't draft them. I love group of 5 guys. My roster is always made up of a lot of group of 5 players. But if your entire roster is built around a group of 5, think about the way a schedule is built. And a lot of times you're going to have group of 5 teams going and getting waxed in earlier season games or in week 12, which could be championship games. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have got so many guys in group of 5 because you've got years ago, you had the Bowling Green offense going crazy. Last year, you had Western Kentucky's offense going crazy. make sure you have a balance, because if you go all group of 5 just because those offenses put up tons and tons of points, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you might have weeks that are super important that you're not going to have a whole lot of guys you can really count on, because you've got the SEC teams bringing in, Sisters of Mercy to go smack them around before rivalry week. So just keep yourself away from making sure your whole roster is not completely group of 5.
Yeah, a couple more. That's a good call out for sure there. Georgia hasn't had a 1,000-yard running back since DeAndre Swift, which, is only a couple years ago. But you kind of just think of Georgia as a running powerhouse, great O-line, great recruiting across the board, and they do have a stable of running backs. But with the dual threat quarterback, man, I just don't think this is the year that they're going to feature a running back. And I hope I'm wrong, because I love, they've got obviously a couple of guys that'll take the lead there, and then they've got some young guys that are coming in that'll get some touches too, and they're all going to be exciting to watch. If one guy ends up taking the lead there, certainly I would be happy to change my tune, but for now I'd say avoid UGA, kind of where they're getting drafted, unless you can get one super late. It's going to be the dreaded running back by committee. And then Memphis, man, I just can't fully get a good pulse on Memphis. We're just going to have to continue to follow what's going on in fall practice. So Memphis last year was led by Brandon Thomas, freshman, won the job, 5.8 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns, but only 116 attempts because he ended up fumbling a couple times, kind of losing the trust there of the coaching staff, and Rodriguez Clark came in and got some touches. And then a transfer in the offseason from Jay Ducker, who had 1,180 yards, only 3 touchdowns, but 1,100 yards from Northern Illinois. So you kind of figure maybe Ducker's going to be the guy, maybe Brandon Thomas is going to be the guy, maybe they split touches or whatever too much to be really fantasy relevant. You kind of miss those Norvell, Memphis rushing offenses for fantasy.
I think for me, one of the pitfalls is looking at a school like Western Kentucky that had a unicorn kind of situation happen, where you had Zappy that was at Houston Baptist that went to Western Kentucky with some familiar faces that actually brought him up there, and he went absolutely insane, had one of the best seasons ever in the history of college football last year. So there were wide receivers that were having stats just completely going crazy at Western Kentucky last year. But Zappy's not there anymore, and there's nothing saying that there is a Zappy Jr. that's going to be the quarterback. I mean, you have a guy, like I said, that literally went from 2 different schools to, and he was performing at a high level. So just because those Western Kentucky receivers were amazing last year doesn't mean that they're going to stay that way. So just keep your eye on those kind of situations. Who's left that's going to be getting him that ball?
Another one that's going to be interesting. You've got kind of a boom or disappointment kind of scenario. Is that Northern Illinois at running back? They run the ball a lot. They run the ball more than they throw the ball. They've got a fullback last year that had more than 100 carries. So interesting offense. That's fun to me, really. Jay Ducker led in attempts and yards, and now he's gone to Memphis. But you've got Harrison Whaley, who started out really hot, and then he was hurt. Ontario Brown came on. He was really good. Both of them had more than 500 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, and just gotta wait and see if one of them ends up taking the lead there. They both can be fantasy relevant at Northern Illinois, but not worthy of an RB1 or maybe even an RB2 in your league, depending on how big it is.
All right, did you say you have one more in the questions or in the pitfalls, or is that all of them?
That's all for now. And if you guys have others that you want to chat through, just find us on the Discord. Certainly feel free to hop into the podcast channel and submit some questions. But yeah, great question there from Big Red.
Now, did you say there was a couple other comments that you wanted to shout out from the Discord channel?
So Mike Dillingham met with me and talked about an idea for rankings, and I've had this honestly from a couple members in the past, but just whenever we do make adjustments, kind of publishing them and then what happened, it can be pretty cumbersome to kind of go through and update a bunch of players where they're ranked and then also list out everything and why. So we are at least going to add some sort of arrow. So like a green up arrow, red down arrow as players are moving around. And we'll try and keep our notes popping in there so that you can kind of see the reasons why. And we'll let you know first on the Discord, certainly update Twitter too whenever there's a big update that happens so that you can, in case you've got rankings downloaded, can kind of re-download and adjust from there.
Now, Brian, how many guys do you have right now, without naming names, how many guys do you have that are actually the team working on those rankings with you right now? Because it's not just you that's doing this, right?
Right. So we've got, I don't mind naming names,
Yeah,
but we've
names.
got, so Zach Tao helps out quite a bit. We talk through players and things like that. Danny Tucker, we've got Josiah Connor on the team, Mike Dillingham, he and I will talk through everything. Doug Gravely and a couple other guys that help out from time to time. But it's always good to have that collaboration and kind of get people who have different perspectives. Ideally, in the future, we'll have people that kind of own a conference so that they can kind of, it's kind of difficult to just say Pac-12 right now, knowing that they're kind of falling apart a little bit. But let's just say someone on the West Coast who is focused there. That's really the future goal, is to have conference-specific people working on rankings and kind of collaborating. But yeah, right now we've got a really good group of guys that help out a ton with the rankings.
So we talk about, Brian talks about the home league. I call it the expert league. The reason why I call it our experts league, outside of Zach Tao, every other name that has been mentioned in this podcast, Uncle Joe, Mike Dillingham, Josiah Connor, Danny Tucker, Brian and myself, these are all guys that are in that league. So what that means is if these guys are in the weeds and they are deep in it, you're not going to be pulling one over on these guys. You're talking about having to get there and beat the best of the best to get to the top of the top of the heap. So so that's why if you're getting information, if you see Bru Mccoy is doing great in his league, if you see he's got good information, he's got a lot of very intelligent guys that are working for CFB Dynasty. So that's why you want to make sure that you go out there and get yourself a subscription to CFBDynasty.com so that you can have access to all these rankings. These are not guys that are just fly by night. They're pulling it from the other sites that are out there. They're actually working diligently to make sure they've got intense information because they want to be at the top of our experts league as well.
No doubt. That's a good call out. And yeah, we want to have fun. We want to produce a great product, and we really look forward to kind of talking through things with you guys as we go into, the season, where on the Discord we'll be talking through kind of waiver wire pickups every week. Who should you pick up if they're free or not free, depending on, some data that we have. And then we're also going to be perfecting our algorithm to help you set DFS lineups, and we'll try and make a lot of money together and hope that we can build a tool that will provide great insights for those DFS lineup optimizations.
All right, so the last thing, I guess, before we have our next podcast, we're going to have that draft. We would love to be able to share with you guys some of the results of that draft. It's going to be a little bit different because a lot of the top players are already on rosters. So when you see our draft from this Sunday, you're going to be like, well, why wasn't this guy drafted? Why wasn't that guy drafted? Well, because they're already on one of our experts rosters. We'd love to be able to talk with you about that next week on the podcast, give you some of the highlights, especially give you one of the question marks. Why did Uncle Joe draft that guy for the third time? We'd love to be able to share that with you guys. Let us know in the Discord if you guys want to hear about that. Let us know what kind of questions that you have specifically about how our draft goes, or any other question that you have out there. So Brian, unless you have something else for this podcast, why don't you tell them what we're going to be doing next week?
Next week we'll be diving into tight ends, and really that's all that I have for this podcast. I know Zach and I will be talking through this insane league. And Matt, I need to get you in the loop on this too. But this league is going to be totally different. Never heard of anything like it. We've been testing it out, but it's going to be a members league. You're all going to be welcome. We are going to run it this year, and we're going to have our draft as close to kickoff for week 1 as possible. Cannot wait. It's going to be a blast. So we'll talk soon about that. And man, that's all for now. I appreciate you guys for listening.
All right, Brian, before we get off of here, why don't you tell them where they can find you and or CFB Dynasty on social media? So if they want to follow you outside of Discord, obviously you want them to go to Discord first. If they want to follow you on social media at any other place, where are they going to go?
Yeah, at CFB Dynasty. Twitter is where most of the action takes place. We'll try and do better on Instagram, kind of providing some behind the scenes kind of stuff. But yeah, Twitter mostly. I'm the one who manages at CFB Dynasty.
All right, my name is Matt Knowles. I am one half of Insymmetry Creations, content writing, comic writing, panel hosting, all kinds of fun stuff. I will be at GeekedCon in Shreveport, Louisiana next week. If you happen to be at GeekedCon and you want to come by the booth or you want to come by one of the panels that I'm hosting and you want to talk a little bit of college fantasy football, feel free to come up and say, hey, man, I saw you up there with the one and only Bru Mccoy on the podcast. Let's do it. Like I said, you can. It's going to be hashtag InSim or /InSim on Facebook, InSim Creations on Twitter, Insymmetry Creations on Instagram, or InsymmetryCreations.com. But that's it for me. So, Brian, unless you have some closing words, do you have anything else you want to say?
Nope, I'm good to go. I do have my tickets for week 1. I'm super stoked. Utah coming into the swamp as a favorite. I can't wait to see that. Hopefully they go home disappointed.
I can't wait to see NC State take the field this year. They're getting some of the highest preseason rankings they have ever had in their history. They've got 14 of their 15 top defenders coming back, probably have the number 1 linebacking crew in the country. Can't wait to see Devin Leary, the preseason ACC Player of the Year. See if we can actually make good on these rankings instead of being the perennial disappointment, which seems like it always happens at NC State. Can we actually live up to all these national rankings? Anyways, I am Matt Knowles, and he is Bru Mccoy. This is the CFBDynasty.com podcast. We thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.